fellow Africans, sons and daughters of this great continent, I rise before you not to entertain, not to flatter, but to provoke your spirit, to shake your soul from the comfort of silence. I ask you today, how many more coffins shall we bury before we realize we are the ones digging the graves of our destiny? How many more flags shall be lowered in false honor when the true story is that a revolutionary was murdered in cold blood? Let it be known I do not come with words dipped in honey. I come with words forged in the fire of pain, because I have watched this continent cry, not because of poverty, but because we keep killing the very leaders who dare to rise for us. We wept for Sankara, we wept for Lumumba, we wept for Gaddafi, we wept for Habyarimana, we wept for Nkurunziza, we wept for Magufuli, and still the earth is not full, still the gun is not empty, still the knife is sharp. And I ask, who profits from this death, who gains when a visionary falls? They tell us our leaders died of heart attacks. They tell us they fell in plane crashes. They tell us they succumbed to illness. But they do not tell us about the bullets hidden behind diplomacy. They do not tell us about the betrayals whispered in air-conditioned rooms. They do not tell us how power fears a black man who cannot be bought. And while they distract us with fiction, the truth is buried with the body, and Africa sleeps again, drugged by forgetfulness. They say a people who do not remember their heroes are a people doomed to bury them again and again, and Africa has become a graveyard of giants men who stood with nothing but courage in their hearts and truth in their mouths, have been silenced not by time, but by bullets, by poison, by betrayal. They were not enemies of the people. They were enemies of imperialism, enemies of exploitation, enemies of corruption. And for that they paid with their lives. We are told to move on. We are told not to ask questions, but how can we forget when every funeral is followed by foreign smiles? How can we move on when every casket carries the weight of a continent's stolen future? How can we be silent when we know that the gun that pulled the trigger was often held by one of our own, bought cheap and used to end a priceless soul? They fear the African leader who speaks without fear. They fear the leader who walks without guards, because such a leader cannot be controlled. He cannot be bought. He cannot be tamed. And so they plot and they plan. And when they cannot bribe him, they bury him. We have watched this script play out in country after country. Leaders who dared to say no to exploitation, leaders who stood between the people and the plunderers, leaders who understood that power is not to be enjoyed but to be used in service, were suddenly gone. And when we ask how they died, we are told to accept coincidence as an answer. We are told to believe that those who challenge powerful empires always die young by accident. Africa is not cursed. Africa is not broken. Africa is being assassinated from within and from without. And the time has come to say it plainly: stop killing our beloved African leaders. It is not enough to mourn. It is not enough to name streets after them. It is not enough to print their faces on banknotes. What honor is there in celebrating the dead? If we cannot protect the living, what pride is there in quoting their speeches? If we betray their sacrifice with silence, the men and women who rise to lead Africa with integrity are not gods. They are flesh and blood. They carry the burden of millions, and they walk in the shadow of betrayal. Yet still they rise knowing that their lives may be shortened, that their names may be dragged, that their legacies may be distorted, but still they rise because they love their people more than they fear death. But why must we always wait until they are gone to speak the truth? Why do we remain silent when they are under attack? Why do we distance ourselves when they are alive, and only draw close when they are being buried? Why do we not raise our voices when they are being threatened, when they are being isolated, when they are being targeted? We must learn to protect our own before it is too late. We must surround them with vigilance, not just praise. We must watch not only the skies for drones, but corridors of power for traitors, because the real enemy often wears a familiar face. It is the face of the one who smiles while plotting it, is the face of the one who sings songs of loyalty in public and signs contracts of betrayal in private. African leaders who stand for Africa must not stand alone. They must feel the warmth of their people's protection. They must hear our voices louder than the whispers of their enemies. They must know that their sacrifice is not in vain, that their lives are not disposable, that their courage will be matched by our unity if we do not protect those who protect us. Then we are preparing the grave of our own hopes, and if we do not rise when they fall, then we are confirming to the world that we do not deserve them. Let it be known today that we will not lose another Thomas Sankara, not to cowardice, not to betrayal, not to silence, not to complicity. Let us make it clear to the world that the blood of one African visionary will no longer be spilled without consequence. We will question every death, we will investigate every silence, we will demand answers, and we will build systems that do not collapse. When a good leader rises, we will strengthen our institutions. Not just to fight enemies, but to protect those who stand with us. We will remember that Africa's liberation is not just about removing the colonizer. It is about protecting the liberator, because every time we kill a leader, we kill a dream. And every time we bury a visionary, we bury a piece of ourselves. This is not a call to arms. This is a call to awakening, a call to recognize the war that is being fought, not with bombs, but with betrayal, not with invasion, but with infiltration, not with open aggression, but with subtle elimination. And we must now say with one voice, with one cry, with one... We'll stop killing our beloved African leaders. Stand for them. While they live, speak for them. While they lead, defend them. While they serve, because a continent that cannot protect its own is a continent not yet free. When a leader of vision falls, it is not only the heart that breaks, it is the spine of people that bends. When a man or woman rises to speak against injustice, to challenge the looting of our wealth, to stand tall before empires and say no more, it is not just their voice that speaks, it is the voice of the land, it is the voice of history, and it is the voice of generations yet unborn. So when they are silenced, when they are taken away, when they are buried before their dreams are born, it is not a single loss, it is the collapse of 1,000 possibilities, it is the death of 1,000 reforms, it is the betrayal of 1,000 children who will now grow up under leaders who fear truth and bow to foreign pressure. You see, Africa does not bleed because it lacks brave leaders. Africa bleeds because every time courage is born, cowardice surrounds it. Every time a new light shines, shadows gather. Every time a voice speaks powerfully, vultures begin to circle. This continent has never been short of men and women of strength. What we have lacked is a shield around them. We have lacked a collective conscience. We have lacked a people ready to stand up and say, if you touch our lion, you will feel the roar of the pride. Because when our leaders fall, we lose more than a figure, we lose momentum. We lose faith and we lose time, and Africa has already lost too much time. Look at our past, and you will see a pattern. It is not natural death that takes them, it is political death. It is economic assassination. It is character defamation. It is state betrayal. Look at how we forget. Look at how we mourn. For a week, then return to business as usual, as if nothing happened, as if the soil was not stained, as if the dream did not die with the man. We quote their words, we repost their images, we sing songs of remembrance. But our systems remain weak, our courage remains timid, and our memories remain short. How many schools were never built because the visionary who believed in free education was eliminated? How many hospitals were never equipped because the leader who rejected aid with strings was silenced? How many infrastructure projects were never completed because the man who fought corruption was betrayed? How many constitutions were never reformed because the woman who challenged injustice was removed from power? When a leader of substance dies, it is not just the people who mourn, it is the unborn, it is the voiceless, it is the dream itself that sheds tears. And when we pretend that their absence does not matter, we contribute to the erosion of progress. We must understand that these assassinations are not random, they are strategic. They are not accidental, they are intentional. They are not unfortunate events, they are orchestrated moves to keep Africa submissive, because a continent led by visionaries is a threat to the status quo. A continent led by fearless truth speakers is a threat to global control. And so every time one rises, forces from within and without unite to bring them down. And the tragedy is not only in their death, but in our failure to protect them, to honor them. carry their mission forward. African progress cannot be built on broken promises and broken bodies. We must now recognize that leadership is sacred, and leaders who rise for Africa must be guarded like treasures, not only with weapons, but with wisdom, not only with security, but with strategy, not only with institutions, but with people willing to rise as a wall against any harm. We must make it known that the days of killing our dreams with silence are over, that the days of burying progress with bullets are over, that the days of replacing lions with puppets are over, and we must teach our children that when a leader is attacked, they must not look away, they must not hesitate, they must not wonder whose tribe he is from or which language he speaks. They must rise, because when one visionary falls, all of Africa falls a little with him. Our schools must teach the truth about these leaders, not just their deaths, but their ideas, their plans, their policies. Our media must highlight their work, not just on memorial days, but every day as a lesson in courage. Our communities must remember them not as martyrs, but as milestones in the journey toward freedom, and we must ensure that no leader dies in vain, that every drop of blood spilled waters a seed of resistance, that every name buried becomes a banner of inspiration, and that every unfinished work becomes a call to action. It has been said that the knife that cuts deepest is not the one held by the enemy, but the one handed by a brother, and this is the pain that Africa knows too well. The leaders who dared to speak truth, who rose with integrity, who chose the difficult path of justice, were not only targeted by outsiders, they were betrayed by their own. The most painful part of Africa's tragedy is not that the colonizer came, it is that colonizer stayed through us, through our silence, through our greed, through our willingness to sell our souls for a handshake and a handshake price. And every time a great leader falls, we must ask not only who pulled the trigger, but who opened the door, who gave the coordinates, who remained silent. While betrayal brewed in the shadows, Africa's enemies have always known they cannot destroy us unless we destroy ourselves, so they do not always need to bomb our homes. They only need to buy our leaders. They do not need to invade our lands. They only need to convince a few of us to sign away our resources. They do not need to silence our voices if they can pay some among us to mock and discredit our heroes. It is not always the foreign agent who poisons the food. Sometimes it is the trusted aide who serves the plate. And when we look back at the great losses we have suffered, from Thomas Sankara to Patrice Lumumba, from Muammar Gaddafi to others unnamed, we see a pattern of betrayal not only by nations far away, but by hands within our own walls, hands that look like ours, but carry the instructions of the enemy. They come dressed in loyalty, but their hearts beat for another master. They speak the language of liberation, but their contracts are signed in the offices of exploitation. They celebrate the flag, but their allegiance is to the foreign currency. They cry when a leader dies, but they did nothing when the leader was alive, surrounded and isolated and targeted, because betrayal is rarely loud, it is quiet, it is cunning, and it is calculated. And the greatest threat to African leadership is not always the external empire. It is the internal traitor, the one who sees the truth but chooses to protect comfort, the one who understands the mission but fears the sacrifice. And so when a leader is taken from us, the world watches in silence, but we must watch ourselves in shame, because many times the killer wore our face and spoke our tongue. Africa must awaken to this cancer within. We must understand that our struggle is not just against the external oppressor, but against the internal collaborator, against the one who chooses position over principle, the one who puts title before truth, the one who will poison the well so he alone can drink from it. We must raise a generation that knows that betrayal is not intelligence, that selling your own is not strategy, that silence in the face of evil is not wisdom, and we must teach that loyalty to Africa must never be for sale, never be negotiable, never be diluted by fear or greed. We must build systems that detect betrayal not when it is too late, but when it begins to whisper in corridors of power. We must protect our leaders not only with security guards, but with transparent governance, with vigilant people, with strong institutions, with unbreakable unity. And when we see signs of sabotage, we must call it out, whether it comes from foreign hands or local mouths. because the moment we accept betrayal as politics, the moment we normalize treachery as tactics, we sign the death warrant of our own future. A nation that celebrates betrayers buries its own progress with applause, and to those who continue to sell Africa piece by piece for personal gain, your names may not be known today, but history is watching your descendants. Will one day ask why their soil is poor, why their schools are broken, why their rivers are polluted, and they will trace the pain back to you, you who stood by and said nothing, you who shook hands with thieves, you who chose money over memory and power over people. But the good news is this: we can still change this narrative, we can still rise, we can still protect the ones who protect us, and we can still reclaim the dignity we have allowed to be sold. Africa's story must now be written not by traitors, but by truth-bearers, not by those who kneel to foreign pressure, but by those who stand firm for African pride. We must look each other in the eye and say, never again will we betray a leader who rises for us, never again will we allow truth to be killed in silence, never again will we bury a visionary without asking who handed the gun and why, and that is why the time for fear is over. There comes a moment in the life of every people when silence is no longer an option, when fear becomes a betrayal, and when unity is not just a choice, but a duty. Africa is at that moment. We cannot continue to walk divided when our enemies are united. We cannot continue to whisper when oppression shouts, and we cannot continue to mourn our leaders without defending the living. It is not enough to love our heroes when they are gone. We must begin to stand for them when they are here. And this requires a new spirit, a new fire, a new courage. From the mountains of Lesotho to the deserts of Mali, from the coasts of Senegal to the forests of the Congo, our voices must rise as one to declare that Africa will no longer sacrifice its children to the altar of manipulation, to the chains of dependency, to the poisons of betrayal. Unity is not a slogan, it is not a song, it is a shield, it is a weapon, it is the fortress that will protect our leaders, our land, and our legacy. When we are divided, we are weak. When we are fragmented, we are vulnerable. And when we stand apart, we fall together. So let us rise together. Let us recognize that our strength is not in our tribes, not in our borders, not in our flags, but in our shared struggle, in our common destiny, and in our united vision of an Africa that stands tall, that speaks with one voice, and that defends its lions not with empty praise, but with unshakable loyalty. Africa must no longer be a playground for foreign interests. It must be a sanctuary for African dreams, and those who dare to lead us toward this dream must be protected not only by their governments, but by their people. The days of watching leaders fall in isolation must end. The days of pretending it is not our concern must end, and the days of waiting for the world to act must end. The world has shown us that it will not cry when our leaders are killed. It will not mourn when our revolutions are crushed. It will not defend our truth because our truth threatens its profit. And so Africa must defend its own with its own. We must be our brother's keeper. We must be our sister's shield. And we must be the wall that stands between the visionary and the vulture. This is not a time for tribal division, for political jealousy, or for regional suspicion. This is a time for African solidarity, for continental awareness, for generational clarity. If a leader rises in Burkina Faso and falls, the people of Kenya must speak. If a leader is attacked in Uganda, the people of Zimbabwe must rise. If a voice is silenced in Nigeria, the people of Rwanda must shout, because the battle is not local. It is continental, it is global, and we must understand that protecting one is protecting all, that defending one is defending Africa, and that ignoring one is betraying the whole continent. Africa must build a culture of defense, not just physical defense, but ideological defense, economic defense, and spiritual defense. We must support those who break chains, who challenge injustice, who reject exploitation. We must tell our youth that the true hero is not the celebrity, but the leader who sacrifices for the people, the one who refuses to be bought, the one who puts nation before self, the one who chooses history over popularity. And when we see such leaders, we must not only follow them, we must protect them. from lies, from sabotage, and from bullets disguised as progress. We need more than tears. We need structures that protect integrity. We need alliances that expose betrayal. We need institutions that preserve legacy. And we need people who are ready to rise not only when it is safe, but when it is necessary. The dream of Africa cannot survive if every dreamer is killed. It cannot thrive if every truth teller is silenced, and it cannot grow if every gardener of hope is buried before harvest. We must remember that every time we allow a lion to be hunted, we are telling the cubs that courage is punished, that truth is dangerous, and that love for Africa leads to death. And we must change that story now. We must create a continent where the brave are protected, where vision is safe, and where leadership does not come with a death sentence. Africa has the power, it has the people, it has the passion. What we need now is unity, what we need now is purpose, what we need now is protection of those who light the way, because if we do not protect them, the darkness will return, and we will again be led by puppets and pretenders, and we will again be exploited and silenced, and we will again gather only to mourn. And so I say this with the full weight of conviction: the future belongs to the united and the fearless, and that is why the time for fear is over.